What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Whyloric. So today we're diving into Cleopatra, and trust me, everything you think you know about her is probably wrong. Let's jump in.
So, I want you to just picture the most famous Egyptian queen in human history.
Oh, I think we all know exactly the image that comes to mind right away.
Right, exactly. If you're like most of us, you're immediately seeing the Hollywood version.
Yep.
You're picturing the massive golden headdresses, maybe the sprawling Nile River in the background.
Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth Taylor, 100%. Just this tragic, romantic, draped in jewels, or, this irresistible, seductive beauty lounging on a royal barge.
Which is, it's an incredibly powerful image. It really stuck.
It really did. But now I want you to imagine finding out that the single most famous Egyptian in all of history didn't actually have a single drop of Egyptian blood.
Yeah, that's the fact that just completely upends the entire pop culture narrative right out of the gate.
It really does.
Because we're talking about a historical figure who has been buried under, over 2 millennia of essentially cinematic slough. Long before cinema even existed, really.
Right. And that is exactly why we are here. Welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating stack of historical sources today. And our entire mission here is to just pull the actual reality out of all that mythology.
Yeah, to see what's really there.
Exactly. Because by the end of this conversation, we're going to completely dismantle that decorative romantic icon you've been sold.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to look at the actual mechanics of a brilliant, calculating geopolitical strategist, a woman who was quite literally attempting to manage a hostile takeover from the absolute greatest military empire of the ancient world.
It's wild because the gap between the historical reality in these sources and the myth that we all know, it's staggering.
It's totally, completely different.
Right. When you start looking at the actual logistics of her reign, how she actually ruled, you realize that the narrative we all grew up with is fundamentally just a projection.
Well, let's just start right there with that visceral fact we just mentioned.
Yeah.
The Cleopatra we all know, the ultimate symbol of ancient Egypt, she wasn't ethnically Egyptian. She was Greek.
Macedonian Greek specifically, yeah.
Which is crazy to think about.
It really is. She was a direct descendant of the Ptolemaic dynasty.
Right.
And this goes all the way back to Ptolemy Isoter, who was one of Alexander the Great's top generals.
Wait, so Alexander the Great conquers Egypt?
Right. And when Alexander died, his empire basically immediately fractured.
Sure.
So Ptolemy essentially seized Egypt, and he and his family just installed themselves as the ruling class.
Just set up shop.
Set up shop and said, we're in charge now. And they ruled for nearly 3 centuries.
300 years. That's older than the United States.
It's a massive amount of times.
But what I find fascinating here is the cultural isolation of it all. Our sources point out that for those entire 3 centuries, this dynasty stayed completely culturally Greek.
Yeah.
Like they didn't assimilate at all.
They absolutely refused to. The Ptolemies operated entirely out of Alexandria. And Alexandria was essentially this Greek bubble that they grafted onto the edge of the African continent.
Just a little slice of Greece and Egypt.
Exactly. They lived like Greek monarchs, they worshipped Greek gods, and they only spoke Greek.
Wow.
And it wasn't just laziness, right? It was a very deliberate mechanism of power.
How so?
Well, by maintaining that rigid cultural wall, they were continuously signaling to the local Egyptian populace that they were the conquerors. They were the elite. They were separate.
Okay, so think of this like a modern corporate structure because the sources kind of lean into this vibe.
I like that.
Imagine a massive multinational company.
Okay.
You have this family of absentee corporate CEOs who execute a hostile takeover.
Right.
And they just pass the CEO title down from generation to generation for 300 years.
Yep.
And in all that time, literally centuries, not a single one of them ever steps foot on the factory floor to talk to the workers.
Never once.
They never even bother to learn the industry jargon. They just sit in the penthouse suite up in Alexandria, completely insulated, and they just rely on middle managers to do all the talking.
That is a highly accurate way to look at the administrative reality of Ptolemaic Egypt. They required an immense, sprawling bureaucracy of bilingual scribes and interpreters.
Just to run the country.
Right, just to translate their edicts from the Greek penthouse down to the local level.
That's incredible.
And you can actually see the remnants of this bureaucracy in everyday history. Like, think about the Rosetta Stone.
Wait, really?
Yes, the Rosetta Stone. We think of it as this majestic key to ancient history, but it was literally just a tax decree.
A tax decree.
Yeah. It was just a boring bureaucratic memo written in Greek for the rulers, Demotic for the middle managers, and hieroglyphs for the local priests so everyone could read it.
So it's literally just corporate paperwork.
Exactly. It's middle management paperwork. But, that kind of insulation, sitting in the penthouse for 300 years, it breeds a specific fatal vulnerability over time.
Because you have no idea what the factory floor is actually planning.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You don't have the pulse of the nation at all.
Right?
You don't know the nuances of local grievances. You miss the religious undercurrents. You don't see the shifting loyalties, the native priesthoods.
You're just blind.
You are entirely reliant on a filtered reality provided by your advisors.
Yeah.
And advisors lie.
Which is what makes Cleopatra's pivot so profound. Because our sources show that after 300 years of this penthouse isolation, she finally breaks the streak.
He does.
She is the very first ruler in her entire dynasty's history to actually learn the Egyptian language.
It's a huge deal.
And it wasn't just like conversational Egyptian either, right?
No, not at all. She learned the complex formal registers that were used by the priesthoods,
Yeah.
the religious language.
It's just an astonishing strategic shift. And it clearly wasn't merely an intellectual hobby for her.
Oh, absolutely not.
Being able to speak directly to the local power structures fundamentally changed how she could govern. I want to really dig into the why here, because it's easy to look at this and just say, oh, she was a natural polyglot, she liked languages.
Yeah, that's the superficial read.
But given the political climate of the time, this feels like an acute realization that the old corporate model was failing. Like, she looked at the unrest and realized those middle managers couldn't be trusted anymore.
The sources back that up entirely. I mean, consider the concept of Hellenistic syncretism.
Okay, break that down for us.
It's basically this blending of Greek and local cultures to create a unified religious and political front.
Got it.
Her predecessors kind of just paid lip service to it. They built some temples, sure, but Cleopatra actively embodied it.
She actually did the work.
Yes, because by speaking the language, she could participate in the sacred rites at Memphis directly.
Oh, wow.
She presented herself not just as a Greek queen, but as the literal living incarnation of the Egyptian goddess Isis.
That's a huge claim.
Right. And you cannot effectively execute that level of religious propaganda through a translator.
You completely lose the authenticity.
You lose the divine authority. Imagine a living God needing an interpreter to talk to you. It doesn't work.
No, it really doesn't.
When she spoke to the native priesthoods in their own language, she was totally bypassing the Greek bureaucracy. She was forging a direct, unmediated loyalty with the religious and economic heart of the entire country.
She's essentially securing her base.
Exactly.
And she really needed that base locked down tight because the external threat she was facing was unlike anything her ancestors had ever dealt with,
Very true.
which transitions us perfectly into the macroeconomic reality of the Mediterranean at the time.
Ah, yes. The geopolitical chessboard.
Right. And here's where we really have to reevaluate this whole 4D chess narrative that the sources bring up.
Right.
Our sources describe her as incredibly sharp, politically, deeply involved in complex negotiations. But let's actually look at the board she's playing on here.
It's a terrifying board.
It is. She's trying to hold on to power while the Roman Republic is fundamentally collapsing into an empire, and Rome is aggressively, rapidly expanding in every direction.
Right. To really understand the immense pressure she was under, you have to understand the structural deficit of the late Roman Republic.
Okay.
Rome wasn't just a military juggernaut. It was a heavily militarized economy that constantly needed a massive influx of capital just to survive.
Just to keep the lights on.
Exactly. Because by this point, the Roman legions were no longer just like citizen militias fighting for the glory of Rome.
Right. They were professional.
They were standing professional armies. And they were fiercely loyal to individual generals like Pompey or Julius Caesar or Mark Antony.
Not loyal to the Senate.
No, loyal to the guy writing their paychecks. And those generals had to pay them, or else they'd mutiny.
So going back to our corporate analogy, Rome is a heavily leveraged firm at this point.
Very heavily leveraged.
They have this massive, unsustainable military overhead.
Yeah.
To pay those legions, they need constant hostile takeovers.
Right.
They basically have to conquer, loot, and tax new territories just to service their own internal debt.
That is exactly it.
Right.
And sitting right across the Mediterranean is Egypt.
Just waiting there.
Unconquered. Culturally magnificent.
Oh,
But most importantly, it is the absolute breadbasket of the ancient world.
The grain.
The grain. The Nile River provides massive, reliable agricultural surpluses. And Rome had a huge urban population that relied on the grain dole.
The cura e none, right?
Yes, the cura e none. Free or subsidized grain just to prevent massive riots in the streets of Rome.
Wow.
So Egypt wasn't just some wealthy foreign nation. It was the ultimate cash cow. It was the primary food supply for the Roman people.
So imagine you're Cleopatra. You wake up every single day as the ruler of this independent nation, and you know that your country's vast wealth is exactly what the aggressive, heavily armed superpower next door desperately needs to fund its own civil wars.
I mean, it is an existential nightmare. It's a ticking clock.
Absolutely.
And the traditional Ptolemaic strategy up to this point had just been to pay Rome off.
Just throwing money at the problem.
Right. Essentially offering stock options to keep the hostile takeover at bay.
Yeah.
But that was reaching its absolute limit.
Yeah, the sources mention her father, right?
Yes. Her father, Ptolemy XII, had practically bankrupted the entire country, paying bribes to Roman senators just to maintain his own throne.
So Cleopatra inherits the debt and the vulnerability.
Exactly. The treasury is drained and the Romans are still hungry.
So she realizes that this financial appeasement, this bribery, isn't going to work forever.
No.
The sources actually point out her multilingualism again here, but applied to foreign diplomacy this time.
Yes.
If you are negotiating with Rome, which is a superpower totally famous for its arrogance, being able to bypass the interpreters is a massive tactical advantage.
It's critical. I mean, Roman envoys were completely accustomed to walking into a room and just dictating terms.
Right.
But by speaking their language and several other regional languages, she controlled the flow of information completely.
She didn't have to wait for the translation to drop.
Right. She could read their immediate reactions. She could pivot her arguments instantly, and she could establish a direct personal rapport.
It's brilliant.
It's the difference between, reading a sanitized transcript of a board meeting and actually being in the room, reading the body language, and actively manipulating the negotiations in real time.
Okay, but I have to push back and challenge this 4D chess grandmaster premise a little bit.
Sure.
Because if she's so brilliant, why is her entire foreign policy essentially just putting all her chips on individual Roman generals?
Right.
I mean, think about it. She aligns with Julius Caesar, and then Caesar gets assassinated.
Right.
Then she aligns with Mark Antony. And Antony is, let's be honest, notoriously volatile.
Very true.
Isn't tying the fate of your entire sovereign nation to the survival of these men who are constantly embroiled in vicious civil wars a massive strategic flaw? Why not use that immense wealth to just build up a massive Ptolemaic army and fortify her own borders?
That is the fundamental question of her entire reign. But to answer it, it requires looking at the brutal math of ancient warfare.
Okay, let's hear the math.
Could she have dot mercenaries?
Yes.
Could she have built a larger fleet? She actually did do that.
Right.
But hard military might, specifically the heavy infantry that completely defined the era that was Rome's absolute monopoly.
Nobody could beat the legions.
Nobody. A direct, conventional military confrontation with the hardened, veteran legions of the Roman Republic would have been immediate geopolitical suicide.
So it wasn't even an option.
No. She couldn't outmuscle Rome on an open battlefield. The math just wasn't there.
So she literally couldn't use hard power.
Right. Rome had the infrastructure, the training, and the momentum. So what does she do? She utilizes the ancient model of the client state, but she weaponizes it.
How so?
She knew Rome was internally fractured. Like we said, these generals were tearing the Republic apart, vying for absolute supremacy. Her strategy was to make Egypt the indispensable bankroll for whoever was going to win those power struggles.
It's soft power. It's statecraft disguised as romance.
Exactly.
And this is where the pop culture narrative just totally fails. It fixates on the seduction of Caesar and the seduction of Antony, and it just reduces her to this tired trope.
It's so reductive.
But you're saying these were calculated transactional geopolitical mergers?
Completely transactional. Let's
Yeah.
actually look at the specific terms of these alliances because it makes it so clear.
Let's do it.
When she first aligned with Julius Caesar, she was in the middle of a brutal civil war against her own brother for the throne of Egypt.
Okay.
She desperately needed Roman military muscle to secure her own crown.
Makes sense.
Now, Caesar, on the other hand, was embroiled in his own civil war against Pompey, and he was desperately short on cash.
So she funds his war, and he fights hers.
Exactly. It's a perfect merger. She brings the agricultural wealth and the treasury of Egypt to the table. He brings veteran Roman legions. It was a highly calculated exchange of resources.
Wow.
And it was the exact same dynamic later with Mark Antony.
How did that one work?
Well, Antony needed the immense wealth of Egypt to fund his massive military campaign against the Parthian Empire in the east.
Okay.
Cleopatra needed Antony's military protection to deter Octavian and the Western Roman forces from invading Egypt.
I mean, it requires a very modern, almost cynical lens to deconstruct this properly, because pop culture just strips her of her agency as a head of state by calling it a tragic romance.
It really does.
But when you think about it, for a female ruler operating in a deeply patriarchal geopolitical landscape, without the option of fielding her own heavy infantry, forging deeply personal, legally binding alliances with the leaders of the encroaching empire, was literally the ultimate defensive strategy.
Oh, absolutely. And we have to remember, the lines between personal affection and political necessity in the ancient monarchical system were entirely blurred anyway.
Right. They didn't separate them like we do.
Exactly. Could she have felt genuine affection for them? Certainly. I mean, they were brilliant, ambitious peers operating at the exact same high-stakes level she was.
They probably had a lot in common.
But could she afford to align with a Roman who wasn't strategically beneficial to the survival of Egypt?
Never.
Absolutely not. Every single personal choice she made had dire national security implications.
It's just fascinating. But it's also incredibly dark when you look at how this played out historically.
Very dark.
Because this very strategy, leveraging her wealth and her personal alliances to manipulate Roman factions, was exactly what Octavian ended up weaponizing against her.
Right. The very tool she used to save her country became the exact instrument used to obliterate her reputation.
Let's get into the mechanics of the smear campaign. The sources call it the villain edit.
Yeah, that's a great term for it.
Our sources are very clear that this whole seductress queen narrative didn't just evolve naturally over time. It was a deliberate, highly engineered piece of Roman propaganda constructed specifically by Octavian.
Yes. And to understand why Octavian engineered this, you have to look at his domestic political situation in Rome at the time.
Set the scene for us.
Okay, so Octavian has a massive PR problem. He's locked in this intense power struggle with Mark Antony. And Antony is a very popular, very established, decorated Roman general.
Right.
Octavian wants to eliminate Antony, obviously. But he cannot frame it as another Roman civil war.
Why not?
Because the Roman populace was completely exhausted. They had suffered through decades of civil wars. If Octavian goes to the Senate and declares war on Antony directly, he risks mass mutiny and losing the support of the people entirely.
So he needs a scapegoat. He needs to frame it as a foreign conflict, not an internal one.
Exactly. So what does he do? He looks east to Alexandria. He takes the strategic alliance between Antony and Cleopatra, and he completely twists it into a narrative of dark corruption.
I see.
He doesn't go to the Senate and say, Antony is my political rival, we need to fight him. He goes to the Senate and says, Antony has been bewitched.
Oh, wow.
He's been corrupted by a foreign temptress who wants to conquer Rome and move our capital to Alexandria.
That is just brilliant, evil politics. And the propaganda was incredibly specific, too. We really have to talk about the donations of Alexandria here, because our sources say that was the actual political ammunition Octavian used, right?
Yes, the donations of Alexandria. This is a crucial event. It was this spectacular geopolitical ceremony in Egypt, where Antony essentially distributed Eastern Roman lands and client kingdoms to Cleopatra and her children.
Okay, so giving away Roman territory.
Right. Now, to Antony and Cleopatra, this was just an administrative reorganization of the East to stabilize their borders. It made strategic sense.
Sure.
But to Octavian back in Rome, it was a massive propaganda gift wrapped with a bow.
How did he use it?
He actually illegally seized Mark Antony's private will from the Temple of the Vestal Virgins in Rome.
Wait, he broke into a temple?
Yes, a sacred temple. He takes the will and he reads it aloud to the Roman Senate.
That's a masterclass in political manipulation right there.
It really is.
He violates a sacred temple just to read a private document that supposedly proves Antony's primary loyalty is to this Egyptian queen and not to Rome.
Exactly. It allowed Octavian to declare war legally with the full backing of the outraged Roman people. And crucially, he didn't declare war on Mark Antony.
Wait, really? Who did he declare war on?
The Roman Senate officially declared war on Cleopatra, Egypt.
Oh, wow.
Antony was simply framed as this tragic Roman victim who had fallen under her dark spell and turned traitor.
The gender dynamics here are just undeniable. I want to run a quick counterfactual just to highlight this.
Let's hear it.
If Cleopatra had been a male king, let's say just another Ptolemaic ruler, making the exact same strategic moves, securing the grain supply, playing the Roman factions against each other, funding Eastern military campaigns. Would Rome have used the temptress angle?
Oh, the nature of the propaganda would have been entirely different.
Right.
I mean, if she were a man, Rome still would have fought him, of course, because the geopolitical reality of needing to absorb Egypt's wealth was unavoidable.
They still needed the money in the grain.
Exactly. But a male king would likely have been painted as a ruthless, ambitious warlord, a dangerous tactical genius attempting to rival Rome.
They would have respected him.
Right. His intellect and his agency would have been central to the Roman narrative, because the Roman patriarchal system could respect male military cunning, even in their worst enemies.
But because she's a woman stepping into that geopolitical arena, her power couldn't be portrayed as rooted in intellect.
It was viewed as a total transgression against the Roman social order. The only narrative framework the Roman Senate actually had available to process a foreign woman outmaneuvering their generals was to attribute her success to illicit, unnatural manipulation.
So they made it about seduction.
Right. They couldn't bring themselves to admit they were being outplayed by a brilliant head of state. So they made it about her body, her exoticism, and her supposed dark magic.
It's incredible. They literally wrote the script that Hollywood is still using today.
They really did.
It perfectly illustrates that quote from the source material. History is written by whoever survives the ending.
Yep.
Octavian won the PR war because ultimately he won the actual war, which brings us to the logistics of that final collapse.
Right, the Battle of Actium.
The turning point. This is where her geopolitical shield finally breaks. But again, pop culture usually frames this specific battle as a cowardly retreat.
Yes.
They always say she panicked, she fled the battle, and she doomed Antony. What is the actual tactical reality of Actium based on our sources?
Well, Actium wasn't a standard naval battle on the open water. It was essentially a massive, suffocating blockade.
Okay, explain that.
Antony and Cleopatra's forces were trapped inside the Ambracian Gulf, right on the coast of Greece, by Octavian's top admiral, Agrippa.
So they're boxed in.
Completely boxed in. They were totally cut off from their supply lines. Their troops were suffering horribly from malaria, and defections to Octavian's side were running incredibly high.
So the 4D chessboard is shrinking rapidly here. They are cornered.
They were completely cornered. The war in Greece was lost. So the decision for Cleopatra's squadron to break through the lines and sail back to Egypt, it wasn't a sudden panic attack.
It wasn't just her running away.
No. Many historians argue it was a desperate, pre-planned breakout attempt. The only strategic play left on the board was to try and save the Egyptian treasury, which was literally loaded on her ships, and get back to Alexandria to fortify the homeland.
But the optics of it, of course, for the Roman propagandists back home were just too good to pass up.
Well, they loved it.
The cowardly foreign queen abandons the brave Roman general in his hour of need.
Exactly. It perfectly fit Octavian's narrative of our character. But the harsh reality is that once that fleet was shattered at Actium, the geopolitical reality shifted permanently.
There was no coming back.
No. The veteran legions were gone. The Roman military machine was now entirely united under Octavian alone, and it was pointed directly at Alexandria.
The hostile takeover is finally happening. Octavian lands in Egypt, and we get the final, intensely mythologized conclusion to her life. The legend of the asp.
Ah, yes. It's arguably the most famous death in all of ancient history, and yet the actual mechanics of it are intensely murky.
Right. Our sources note that historians still actively debate the exact details of how she died.
They do.
I mean, the popular image is always the venomous snake, the Egyptian cobra smuggled in a basket of figs.
Right.
But practically speaking, cobras are large, they're unpredictable, and their venom isn't always a guaranteed peaceful death.
Not at all.
So why does this specific snake story endure so powerfully over, say, more plausible theories like a smuggled vial of poison?
Well, you have to look at it through the exact same lens of the propaganda we just discussed.
Okay.
The asp is an incredibly potent symbol. In ancient Egyptian culture, the uraeus, which is the rearing cobra, is the ultimate symbol of pharaonic royalty and divine protection.
It's the snake they wear on the crown, right?
Exactly. It's literally worn on the crown of the pharaoh.
Oh, wow. So by dying, by the bite of the asp, she's making a final defiant statement of her sovereignty.
Exactly.
She is dying as Isis, as the true pharaoh, completely immune to Roman authority.
That's the Egyptian interpretation, yes. A noble, divine death. But look at how beautifully that also serves the Roman propagandists.
Wait, how does it serve Rome?
Well, to an audience in Rome, dying by the bite of a bizarre, exotic serpent reinforces the narrative of her as this mysterious foreign other.
Oh, I see.
It's dramatic, it's exotic, and it perfectly caps off Octavian's narrative. An exotic queen destroyed by the exotic nature of her own corrupt, untamed land.
It's almost too perfect. I mean, it really reads like a script Octavian himself would have commissioned for a Roman triumph parade.
It really does.
The mythology has just completely overwritten the history. But ultimately, from a macroeconomic and geopolitical standpoint, the specific mechanism of her death is just a footnote, isn't it?
It is. The profound significance is the consequence of her death.
Right.
Because the moment she died, the 300-year Ptolemaic dynasty ended permanently.
Wow.
The entire Hellenistic age ended. The ancient, incredibly wealthy, independent nation of Egypt ceased to exist as a sovereign state.
And it didn't just become another standard Roman province, did it?
No, and this is a really crucial detail. Octavian didn't hand Egypt over to the Roman Senate to govern like the other provinces.
What did he do?
He made it his own personal, private estate.
Just for himself?
Just for himself. He essentially seized the cash cow, using its massive wealth to fund his own transformation from Octavian the politician into Augustus, the very first emperor of Rome.
So the hostile takeover was finally complete and the assets were liquidated to build an empire.
Exactly. The Republic was dead and the empire was funded by Egyptian gold.
Which brings us to the final synthesis of her legacy. Out of hundreds of ancient rulers, she's the one whose name everyone knows. And our sources argue that she represents something incredibly rare in antiquity.
She was a female head of state who held real, independent political and economic power in a global arena that was systematically designed to prevent exactly that.
Right. She didn't have the heavy infantry. She didn't have the hard power. But she used language, economics, religious syncretism, and these high-stakes diplomatic mergers to hold off a superpower that was literally swallowing the known world.
For 2 decades, no less.
Right. She wasn't just some decorative piece in a Roman drama. She was the architect of her nation's survival.
It's legacy that commands immense respect. It is infinitely more impressive than the caricature of the seductress we've all been handed.
So if you started this deep dive picturing the Hollywood version, consider your historical understanding officially upgraded today.
I hope so.
The reality of a trilingual queen managing agricultural tariffs, orchestrating naval breakout attempts, and negotiating face-to-face with the architects of the Roman Empire is just a far better story than the myth.
It requires a bit more effort to understand the economic and military nuances, sure, but it reveals the true mechanics of history.
And it leaves us with a final, rather unsettling thought. We spent this entire time unpacking how Octavian manipulated a narrative simply because he won the war. He had the power to write the script, and that script survived for 2,000 years. So it makes you wonder, as you look at modern geopolitics or you study other historical conflicts, whose villain at it are you currently consuming simply because they were the ones who lost the war?
It's the ultimate question for any student of history, really.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the mechanics behind the stories you've been told and stay curious.
And that's the real Cleopatra, way more than a Hollywood love story. If you enjoyed this, subscribe for more and drop a comment with who we should cover next. Stay curious. This has been Whyloric.